Betrayal is a theme that has repeatedly surfaced throughout human history. In the Bible, betrayal often appears as events that provide important lessons. This story is about 5 individuals from different times and circumstances who committed betrayal for various reasons. Let's take a look at each one. 5th place, King Saul. Saul was the first king of Israel. He was tall and handsome, receiving great expectations from the people. Initially, Saul ascended to the throne with a humble heart and tried to faithfully fulfill the mission God had given him. However, over time, disobedience and jealousy began to take root in Saul's heart. The downfall of King Saul began with an act of disobedience to God's command. God instructed Saul to attack the Amalekites and completely destroy everything. However, Saul did not fully obey God's command. He spared King Agag of the Amalekites and kept the best sheep and cattle as spoils. The prophet Samuel approached Saul, who had disobeyed God's command, and rebuked him, saying, "To obey is better than sacrifice." He then declared that God had rejected Saul as king. After this event, Saul's heart became increasingly restless and troubled. He felt the departure of God's Spirit and was plagued by anxiety and fear. During this time, a new figure, David, who had God's Spirit with him, emerged. David gained the people's love by defeating Goliath, which aroused Saul's jealousy. Saul began to see David as a threat. He felt increasingly threatened by David and became obsessed with the idea of eliminating him. Saul made several attempts to kill David, but David, under God's protection, managed to escape unharmed. Saul even gave his daughter Michal to David in marriage, but this was a ploy to ensnare David further. However, Michal ended up helping David instead. Saul's betrayal stemmed from jealousy and disobedience toward David. He forgot that God had chosen him, relied on people to secure his position, and disregarded God's commands. Saul mobilized his army and waged several wars to eliminate David. However, despite having multiple opportunities to kill Saul, David spared his life, saying he could not harm the Lord's anointed. Saul eventually met his end in a battle against the Philistines, where he and his son Jonathan. His death was tragic and was the result of his actions that defied God's will and followed his own desires. Saul's betrayal and his tragic death highlight the severe consequences of disobeying God's will. 4th place, Ahithophel. Ahithophel was known as the wisest advisor in Israel during King David's reign. His counsel was considered as if it were the word of God, and David highly valued his wisdom. However, Ahithophel chose the path of a traitor, ignoring David's goodwill. Ahithophel served as an important advisor in David's kingdom, offering many crucial strategies and policies. He had David's trust and contributed significantly to the security and prosperity of the kingdom. However, his loyalty wavered when David's son Absalom rebelled. Absalom, dissatisfied with his father, plotted to usurp the throne. Ahithophel decided to side with Absalom's rebellion. His betrayal was a great shock to David, as it was not just a political defection but a betrayal of long-standing trust. Absalom held Ahithophel's wisdom in high regard and sought his counsel. Ahithophel advised Absalom on strategies to eliminate David. Ahithophel suggested that Absalom immediately pursue and ambush David, arguing that they could easily win if they attacked while David was still weary and disorganized. His plan was thorough and logical, but Absalom decided to trust the advice of another counselor, Hushai, over Ahithophel. Realizing that Absalom's rebellion would ultimately fail, Ahithophel foresaw the consequences of his betrayal. He returned home, put his affairs in order, and hanged himself. 3rd place, Samson and Delilah. Samson was born during a time when Israel was severely oppressed by the Philistines. He was given a special mission from God through an angel at birth, and his hair symbolized his vow to God. With his superhuman strength derived from his hair, Samson defeated many Philistines and protected Israel. However, despite his great strength, Samson's weakness was women. Samson repeatedly got involved with Philistine women, leading him into danger. Delilah was a very beautiful woman who captivated Samson. She was hired by the Philistines to uncover the secret of Samson's strength. The Philistines, fearing Samson's power, promised Delilah a substantial reward for discovering his secret. Samson was deeply enamored with Delilah, drawn by her beauty and charm. Delilah began to ask Samson about the secret of his strength. Samson grew weary of her persistent questioning and eventually revealed his true secret to her. He told her that his strength came from his hair and that it must never be cut. Hearing this, Delilah immediately informed the Philistines. While Samson was in a deep sleep, Delilah cut his hair. Samson's strength left him, and he was easily captured by the Philistines. They gouged out his eyes and bound him with chains, forcing him to work as a slave. The story of Samson's betrayal and loss of strength is tragic, but his final moment brought a turning point. When the Philistines were mocking him during a festival, Samson prayed to God one last time. He asked for his strength to return so he could bring down the Philistines, and God answered his prayer. Samson grasped 2 pillars and pushed them with all his might, causing the building to collapse, killing himself and many Philistines. The story of Samson and Delilah encompasses the complex emotions of love and betrayal. Samson, swayed by his weakness and emotions, forgot his mission from God, but in his final moments, he returned to God and fulfilled his mission. This story shows that even in our weaknesses and failures, God's grace and forgiveness are still at work. It also highlights the importance of recognizing our weaknesses and relying on God. Although Samson's tragic end resulted from his poor choices, God listened to his final prayer and gave him strength once more, leaving an important lesson that God's plans transcend our mistakes and failures. Second place. Absalom. Absalom was the 3rd son of King David, known for his handsome appearance and charisma among the people of Israel. His looks were exceptional, and his long, beautiful hair was particularly praised. However, Absalom's ambition was as great as his appearance. He hatched a grand conspiracy to betray his father, David, and seize the throne. Absalom's betrayal began with the incident involving his sister Tamar. Tamar suffered the tragedy of being raped by her half-brother Amnon. King David was deeply shocked by this event but did not properly punish Amnon. This led Absalom to harbor deep anger and resentment. He waited for 2 years, planning his revenge, and eventually killed Amnon to restore Tamar's honor. After killing Amnon, Absalom fled to his maternal grandfather's land and stayed there for 3 years. David knew of his son's whereabouts but did not call him back. However, as time passed, David's heart softened. Eventually, through the mediation of David's general Joab, Absalom was allowed to return to Jerusalem. However, David did not fully forgive him, and the two did not see each other for 2 years. As the relationship with his father did not improve, Absalom grew increasingly discontented. He began to craft a clever plan to build his support base. Absalom stood at the city gate daily, listening to the people's grievances and promising to bring justice, thus winning their hearts. He said, "If only I were appointed judge in the land. Then everyone who has a complaint or case could come to me and I would see that they receive justice." For 4 years, Absalom secretly gathered supporters and prepared for rebellion. He went to Hebron, declared himself king, and initiated a revolt against David. His plan was meticulous, and David, unprepared, had to flee Jerusalem. David escaped with his loyal soldiers, but Absalom's forces quickly took control of Jerusalem. Although Absalom betrayed his father and seized the throne, his reign did not last long. David reorganized his army during his escape and prepared to counterattack with his loyal generals. The two armies clashed in the forest of Ephraim, and David's forces ultimately prevailed. During the battle, Absalom, riding a mule, got his long hair caught in the branches of a tree and was left hanging. David's general Joab found Absalom and killed him while he was still hanging. Upon hearing of Absalom's death, David was deeply grieved. He cried out, "Oh, my son Absalom! My son Absalom! If only I had died instead of you! Oh, Absalom! My son!" Despite his son's betrayal, David still loved him, and Absalom's death left a deep wound in David's heart. First place, Judas Iscariot. Judas Iscariot was one of Jesus' 12 disciples. He witnessed many miracles and heard Jesus' teachings while spending time with him. Jesus shared the secrets of the kingdom of God with his disciples and cared for them with love. However, Judas gradually failed to understand Jesus' path, and darkness began to take hold of his heart. Although Judas followed Jesus, he harbored worldly desires. He had a great love for money and was often involved in managing the communal funds. Despite being with Jesus, Judas grew increasingly disillusioned with Jesus' true mission, which did not align with his own expectations. One day, Judas learned that the chief priests and scribes were plotting to kill Jesus. They feared that Jesus' growing popularity would threaten their authority and position. They were looking for a way to arrest Jesus, and Judas approached them, agreeing to betray Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. With the 30 pieces of silver in his hands, Judas waited for the right moment to betray Jesus. He eventually decided to turn Jesus over to the chief priest's servants in the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus went to pray. On a dark night, Judas led a crowd to the Garden of Gethsemane. He approached Jesus and greeted him with a kiss, signaling to the aristos who Jesus was. Although Jesus knew all about Judas' betrayal, he did not condemn him. Instead, he quietly asked, "Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?" Judas could not meet Jesus' eyes directly. His heart was filled with guilt and regret, but it was already too late. Jesus was arrested and brought before the chief priests and elders, and Judas painfully realized his mistake. He tried to return the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests, but they coldly refused. In despair, Judas threw the silver pieces on the temple floor and took his own life. The story of Judas Iscariot's betrayal remains one of the most tragic stories in the Bible. It shows how terrible the consequences of betrayal can be, while also reminding us of the depth of Jesus' love and forgiveness. Despite being betrayed, Jesus' mission did not change, and through his death and resurrection on the cross, he opened the way of salvation for humanity. Judas' betrayal symbolizes human weakness and sin, but Jesus' sacrifice demonstrates the great love that covers all sin. Betrayal reveals the inherent nature and weaknesses of humanity. King Saul's jealousy and disobedience, Ahithophel's political ambition, Delilah's seduction and betrayal, Absalom's rebellion, and Judas Iscariot's greed all led to tragic ends. Despite their different reasons for choosing betrayal, their outcomes were all filled with ruin and regret. The stories of these figures in the Bible show how frightening the consequences of betrayal can be and also teach the important lesson that God's plan and love surpass human weaknesses. The tragedies of these 5 individuals prompt us to reflect deeply on our actions and choices and to reconsider the value of trust and loyalty.